So, we have looked at how to count the cards in a particular set of cards, and now let us look at this data set we had, which had a paragraph of words, and supposing we want to count how many times each word occurs. So, we really want to find out which word in this paragraph is most frequent. So, first of all, that means we have to count every word, and one difficulty we have is that we do not really know in advance how many words there are and which words will appear. So, let us just read through the paragraph. So, here it is, it says, it was Monday morning. Swaminathan was reluctant to open his eyes. He considered Monday specially unpleasant in the calendar. After the delicious freedom of Saturday and Sunday, it was difficult to get into the Monday mood of work and discipline. He shuddered at the very thought of school, that dismal yellow building, the fire-eyed Vedanayagam, his class teacher, and the headmaster with his thin long cane. So, as far as we are concerned, a word is a single unit. So, there are some hyphenated words like fire-eyed and class teacher. So, we will treat these as single words. Of course, we will ignore commas, full stops and other punctuation. So, the way we go about it is to, as we do with a normal iterator, go through each word. Imagine that this is a stack of cards. So, we will start with the first card, and as we see each card, we will increment the count associated with the word on that card. So, the first word in this paragraph is it, and at this point we do not have a counter for it. So, we create one and set its value to 0, and since we have seen now the first occurrence of the word it, we increment this count and make it 1. So, at this point we have one counter for one word it, and its value is 1 because we have seen one copy. In the same way, we go on to was. Now, this is a new word, we do not have a counter for was. So, again we have to create a counter, set it to 0 and then increment it to indicate that we have seen one word was. The same happens when we see Monday. Again, Monday is not a word we have seen before, and notice as we go along we have to keep looking at all the counters we have already created to see if it is one of them or not. So, at this point we have to compare it with it and was and discover that it is neither of those. So, Monday now gets initialized to 0 and then incremented to 1. Morning also gets initialized to 0 and then incremented to 1. Swaminathan also gets initialized to 0 and incremented to 1. And now we come to the first interesting case, which is the word was. So, we realize that we have seen was before, we already have a counter for was and its value is currently 1. So, we increment it and make it 2. Moving on, we come to a new word reluctant. So, reluctant is a new counter which is incremented to 1. 2 is a new counter which is incremented to 1. So, we are using the word itself to name the counter. So, these are the words in these boxes at the bottom are like variables. So, we are creating a variable for every word in our text. Similarly, open is for the first time. So, open gets incremented to 1. His is appearing for the first time, incremented to 1. Eyes is for the first time, incremented to 1. Now, we come to an end of a sentence, but it does not bother us, we keep going. So, he is coming for the first time. Similarly, considered is coming for the first time. Now, we see Monday. So, Monday has appeared again. Now, you might realize that it is a bit tedious as we go along even manually to go back and check. Every time we have to go through the entire sequence of words. So, if we are actually going to do this in some automated way, we need an efficient way to check which counters have been created and which counters need to be created. Otherwise, you might accidentally create a new counter for Monday and have two different counts for Monday rather than a single count. But anyway, assuming we got it right, we see Monday has already appeared. So, now Monday comes for the second time. So, Monday gets value 2. Specially is a new word, that is 1. Unpleasant is a new word, so that is 1. In is a new word, so that is 1. The is a new word, so that is 1. Calendar is a new word, so that is 1. After is again a new word, so that is 1. Now, we come to the, and the we have seen before. So, the was previously 1, becomes 2. Delicious is a new word, becomes 1. Freedom is a new word, becomes 1. Of is a new word, becomes 1. Saturday is a new word, becomes 1. And is a new word, becomes 1. Sunday is a new word, becomes 1. So, what you can see is that in this particular paragraph, as we go along, we are creating a counter each time we see a word for the first time, and the number of counters is getting rather large. So, we have to keep track of a large number of variables, and not only that, each time we have to decide whether to create a new variable or not. So, it is a little bit tricky as I said, to implement this and not make a mistake. So, now let us go to it. Now, here we have to make a decision. So, notice that we have a counter called it, but it was the very first word in the paragraph which is a capital it, and this is a small letter it, but let us assume that a capital it and a small letter it are actually the same word. So, we will just treat this as a repeat of the word it and make the counter for it 2, even though it is spelt with a capital letter once and with a small letter again. Was again is a word we have seen before. So, was goes from 2 to 3. Difficult is new. 2 we have seen before. So, it goes from 1 to 2. Get is new. Into is new. The we have seen before. So, it goes from 2 to 3. Monday comes now for the third time. So, Monday goes from 2 to 3. Mood is new. Off we have seen before. So, off goes from 1 to 2. Work is new. And has been seen before. So, it goes from 1 to 2. Discipline is new. He again we have seen before. This time we have actually seen it twice with a capital H. As we said, it does not matter whether it is capital or small, but he goes from 1 to 2. Shuddered is new. At is new. The is old. So, it goes from 3 to 4. Very is new. Thought is new. Of is old. It goes from 2 to 3. School is new. That is new. Dismal is new. Yellow is new. Building is new. The is old. It goes from 4 to 5. Fire-eyed, remember we said that fire-eyed we will treat as a single word for our purposes. So, fire-eyed becomes 1. Vedanayagam is a new word, becomes 1. His we have seen before, it goes from 1 to 2. Class teacher again we are treating as a single word, though it is hyphenated. So, it goes from 0 to 1 and now goes to 3. The goes to 6. Head is 1. Master is 1. Width is 1. His was already 2, so it goes to 3. Thin is 0, goes to 1. Long is new, goes to 1. And finally, cane is new and goes to 1. So, we have something like almost 50 distinct words in this paragraph. So, overall this paragraph has something like 65 or 66 words, and of those some are repeated. So, we actually have 50 distinct words, and of course, if we go to a longer piece of text, the number of words in that text could be even more. So, we have to figure out in the long run how to keep these counts in an efficient way, but right now the important thing to notice is that you actually need to keep a variable number of count variables, and we have to name each one so that we recognize which one we have to increment, and as we go along we create them as and when we need them. So, we cannot say in advance that we will need 12 or 15 or 50 or 60, we have to create them as we go along and attach them in some way. Here we have attached them by just using the same name for the variable as the word itself, but we need to find out later on how to do this a little more effectively. So, one of the things we would like to do with this word frequency count is to understand which word appears the most frequently amongst these. So, the way we would have to do it now, given that we have about 48 words and 48 counts, is to go through each of these counts and keep track of the maximum. So, we have to do a second iteration which is almost as long as the first iteration. Remember, there were around 65, 66 words, and then we would discover as we go along that the with 6, of course, here we can see it, but remember that a computational process cannot see the input the way that we think we can see it when we visualize it. And imagine there were not 66 words, but 6,600 words or 6 million words, even we would not be able to glance at it and decide. So, at this point the only thing that we could do to find out the maximum frequency word is to go through all these counts again, starting from it, was, Monday morning and so on, and keep track of the maximum number that appears among the counts. But we saw that we could try to combine these two things. We could try to combine keeping track of the frequency as it is coming up and the currently available maximum count as it is coming up. So, let us try and do that with this data set. So, we start again with our paragraph, the same paragraph as before. So, now we are going to keep, in addition to a count for every word and its frequency, we are also going to keep track of the maximum frequency we have seen so far. So, initially the maximum frequency that we have seen is 0, and the first word we see is it and its count is 0, but when it becomes 1 after seeing it, we compare it to the maximum frequency and we increment the maximum frequency also to 1. The next word is was, which is again a new counter as far as words go. but since its frequency is 1 and the maximum frequency is already 1, we do not have to make any update. So, we go along as before. So, we create a new counter for Monday, again its frequency is the same as the maximum. So, there is no change. We create a new one for morning, again no change in the maximum. Swaminathan, no change in the maximum. Now, we come to was. So, was is a count that is already created. So, we increment the count from 1 to 2, and now when we compare to the maximum frequency, we find that was has a higher value than the current maximum frequency. So, we also update the maximum frequency to 2 to indicate that overall the maximum frequency word we have seen has occurred 2 times. Notice that we do not know which word it is. Okay, we only know that some word has appeared 2 times. So, we keep going. So, reluctant is 0 to 1, 2 is 1, open is 1, his is 1, eyes is 1, he is 1, considered is 1, Monday goes from 1 to 2, but since we already have a word of maximum frequency 2, we do not have to update the maximum frequency, we just leave it as 2. Specially is 1, unpleasant is 1, in is 1. So, for all of these the count is well below the maximum frequency. So, we do not make any update. The is 1, calendar is 1, after is 1, the becomes 2, but again 2 is the same as the maximum frequency currently. So, no update. Delicious is 1, freedom is 1, of is 1, Saturday is 1, and is 1, Sunday is 1, it is 2, but again 2 is the same as the maximum frequency. So, no change. Now, we come to was again. So, was currently 2, now we have seen it for the third time, and since it is 3, we now see that we have exceeded the maximum frequency seen so far. So, we make the maximum frequency also 3. So, now we have seen some word 3 times, we do not know which one. Of course, we look at it as we go along, we know it is was, but if we needed to know which word it was, we should have recorded that separately. We are not doing that, we are just keeping track of the number of times we saw the most frequent word. So, continuing, we see difficult 1, 2 becomes 2, but that is less than 3, get is 1, into is 1, the is now 3, which is the same as the maximum frequency. So, no change. Monday is 3, again the same as the maximum frequency. So, no change. Mood is 1, of is now 2, work is 1, and is 2, discipline is 1, he is 2, shuddered is 1, at is 1. Now, the appears for the 4th time. So, we increment the count of the to 4, and this now is bigger than the maximum frequency. So, the maximum frequency goes from 3 to 4. Very is 1, thought is 1, of is 3, but 3 is less than the maximum frequency 4. So, no change. School is 1, that is 1, dismal is 1, yellow is 1, building is 1, the comes again. Now, the goes from 4 to 5, and so the maximum frequency is 4, and since the has appeared 5 times, we have to update 4 to 5. So, now we know that some word has appeared 5 times. Fire-eyed is 1, Vedanayagam is 1, his is 2, class teacher is 1, and is 3. Now, the appears again. So, the now moves from 5 to 6, 6 is higher than the maximum frequency. So, we update the maximum frequency to 6, head is 1, master is 1, width is 1, his is now 3, thin is 1, long is 1, and cane is 1. So, we have essentially recreated the same thing we did earlier, which is to keep track of the frequency of every individual word in this paragraph, with the additional information that some word in this list appeared 6 times. So, we have simultaneously computed the maximum frequency of the most frequent occurring word, of course, importantly without knowing which word it is, although we could have kept track. So, we could have also kept a second variable which said which is the most frequent word, and initially it was, if you remember up to step 3 it was, and then it changed to the. But right now we have been able to keep track of this, and the important thing is in a single iteration, without going back and iterating through all the counts again, we have not only kept the frequency of every word, we have also kept the maximum frequency, and likewise you can imagine you can keep the minimum frequency and so on. And of course, if you keep minimum frequency in this list, you can see there are several words with frequency 1. So, if you want to know which word is of minimum frequency, you might have to keep track of a lot of information. So, these are all different things that we will tackle as we go along.